Welcome, history seekers. Today we explore the quiet and tragic final moments of Rome. When we think of the fall of Rome, we imagine fierce engagements, burning cities, and heroes. But the real end of this realm was entirely different. There was no grand war, only silence. In the year 476, the power rested on a 16-year-old captive boy. How did the blazing sun fade into a quiet whisper? Let us uncover the truth of Rome. For over 1,000 years, the Roman Empire was the shining sun of the civilized world. It stretched from the burning sands of Arabia to the misty shores of ancient Britannia. But by the late 5th century, that mighty sun had faded into a weak and dying pale light. The glorious capital had been sacked multiple times, leaving only shattered marble ruins. Power shifted to the heavily fortified city of Ravenna, surrounded by deadly swamps. Here, the supreme authority of the known world sat on the fragile shoulders of a young child. His name was Romulus Augustulus, a 16-year-old boy dressed in oversized purple robes. According to historical records, the boy emperor held absolutely no real global power. He sat alone on a massive throne, staring into the dusty and empty grand halls. Outside the palace, the once proud Roman citizens wandered aimlessly through the crumbling stone streets. Their torn clothes and hollow eyes reflected the total collapse of a once mighty and great state. The treasury was completely empty. The government could no longer feed its starving people. The majestic aqueducts were broken, and the bustling trade routes were completely abandoned. If you were a citizen watching your glorious empire crumble to dust, what would you have done? Romulus was merely a puppet, controlled by his ambitious father, who seized the high throne. But his father was soon defeated, leaving the young boy entirely alone to face the dark doom. He clutched his heavy jeweled crown, a hollow symbol of an authority that no longer lived. The silence in the palace was deafening, broken only by the cold wind howling through cracked walls. Rome was no longer an empire of conquerors, but a decaying shell awaiting its final blow. The legendary Roman legions that conquered the world had vanished from the pages of time. In their place stood foreign mercenaries, tribesmen hired to protect the crumbling borders. These Germanic soldiers, known as Foederati, now made up the fragile state's entire army. Wearing heavy animal furs and rusted chainmail, they replaced the disciplined legionnaires. For years they had fought for Rome, expecting gold and fertile land for their loyal service. But the crippled state could no longer pay them, sparking a dangerous fire of rebellion. The mercenaries knew the true power lay not in the empty throne, but in their iron swords. They were tired of taking orders from a weak boy and his defeated generals. A battle-hardened Germanic warlord named Odoacer rose to lead the angry soldiers. He was a practical and ruthless commander who saw the reality of the dying West. Odoacer gathered his massive tribal forces outside Ravenna in the autumn winds.
Tomorrow, we take what is ours.
The mercenaries demanded 1/3 of Italy as payment for their long years of war.
For the taking.
When the Roman officials refused, Odoacer knew the time for talk was truly over. He did not need to wage a violent war. because the Roman enemy was already broken. The Germanic army marched towards the imperial palace with disciplined, deep silence. They held their large wooden shields and tall spears tightly, their faces hardened by brutal war. There were no glorious trumpet calls, only the heavy thud of their boots on the stone roads. Odoacer walked at the front, his heavy wolf fur cloak blowing in the chilling autumn wind. He kept his broadsword in its sheath, knowing that needless bloodshed was unnecessary today. The remaining palace guards offered no resistance as the barbarian forces easily walked in. They simply stepped aside, aware that falling for a doomed boy emperor was a foolish sacrifice. Modern scholars suggest the local Roman population welcomed this peaceful political shift. Exhausted by decades of endless civil wars, heavy taxes, and corrupt, incompetent leaders. To the starving citizens, Odoacer represented stability, even if he was a foreigner. The Warlord entered the grand halls of Ravenna, his imposing shadow stretching across the floors. He walked past the dusty statues of ancient emperors who had once ruled the entire known world. The contrast between the grand architecture and the rugged tribal soldiers was truly striking. Odoacer reached the throne room, where young Romulus Augustulus sat trembling in deep fear. The boy looked incredibly small and fragile beneath the towering figure of the fierce leader. Facing a giant conqueror alone, would you have met your end, or simply surrendered to survive? The tension in the dusty air was palpable as they waited for him to draw his iron sword. But Odoacer remained still, his cold blue eyes staring down at the pathetic symbol of power. He did not yell or threaten the boy, because true absolute power does not need to raise its voice. He simply extended his large, weathered hand, silently demanding the surrender of the empire. Romulus knew his reign was over, and resistance would only lead to his immediate, tragic end. With trembling hands, the 16-year-old boy slowly reached up to remove the heavy, jeweled gold crown. The diadem that once belonged to Augustus and Trajan was now handed over without a fight. He carefully placed the golden artifact into the calloused hands of the barbarian commander. In that quiet and ordinary moment, 1,000 years of Western history simply vanished. Odoacer took the crown with a stoic expression, showing neither joy nor arrogant triumph. He knew the title of Western Roman Emperor was now worthless and incredibly dangerous. Instead of claiming the empty throne for himself, he made a calculated political move. He decided to rule Italy as a king, acknowledging the Eastern Roman Empire's distant reign. This clever decision prevented a massive war and secured his new kingdom for many long years. He then ordered his men to carefully pack up the imperial robes and ancient royal symbols. These sacred items were placed into an old wooden chest, ready to be shipped to the distant east. The message was clear. The Western Roman Empire no longer needed an emperor, for it had died. The deposition of Romulus on September 4th was a profound shock to later historians. There was no dramatic last stand, no burning palace, and no speeches defending the ancient city. The boy emperor was not silenced or made to suffer, a merciful act in those highly brutal times. Odoacer took pity on the child, recognizing Romulus was merely an innocent, helpless tool. He granted the deposed emperor a generous pension and sent him to live in a quiet country home. Romulus traded his purple robes for a linen tunic, fully stripped of his royal identity. He spent his remaining life in obscurity, far away from the dangerous and cutthroat games of power. Odoacer established a new Germanic kingdom in Italy, ruling with surprising fairness. He maintained Roman laws and the Senate, blending barbarian military might with ancient traditions. But the illusion of the eternal Roman Empire in the West was permanently shattered forever. The news of the peaceful surrender slowly spread across the fractured territories of the empire. In Gaul, Hispania, and Britannia, local warlords and tribal kings solidified their own power. Central authority vanished, leaving a highly fragmented landscape of competing barbarian states. The magnificent Roman roads fell into disrepair, and grand stone cities were quickly abandoned. Knowledge and literacy declined, as simple survival became much more important than philosophy. The fading sunlight of classical antiquity was swallowed by the creeping shadows of the Dark Age. Yet the spirit of Rome did not completely die. It transformed and adapted to a harsh new reality. The Catholic Church preserved Latin and the administrative structures of the fallen Grand Empire. Eastward, the Byzantine Empire continued to thrive and carry the Roman legacy for 1,000 years. But the physical and political entity of the Western Roman Empire was buried under the dust. Many scholars argue Rome did not fall in a single day, but rather crumbled slowly over many ages. The events of 476 were merely the final gentle push that toppled a rotting tree. It is a powerful reminder that no civilization, however great, is immune to deep decay. Internal corruption, economic collapse, and relying on foreign soldiers sealed their tragic fate. When a society loses its core values and the will to defend itself, it becomes highly vulnerable. The silent surrender in Ravenna echoes through time as a deeply profound and terrifying lesson. The end of a great era is not always marked by a loud roar, but very often by a quiet whisper. Romulus, the last emperor, is a tragic symbol of a world that simply gave up its long fight. He watched his empire fade into the cold mist, accepting his fate with a heartbreaking resignation. In a remote villa in Campania, he lived out his remaining days tending to a simple farm. Stripped of his royal purple, he became a forgotten shadow of an ancient and glorious past. His quiet existence was a stark contrast to the dramatic demises of his predecessors. Julius Caesar fell on the Senate floor, but the last Roman emperor walked away in deep silence. Odoacer, the Barbarian king, was a capable ruler, bringing temporary peace to the land. He respected ancient institutions, keeping the Roman Senate functioning in the grand old city. But the heart of the empire had permanently shifted to the powerful east, to Constantinople. Emperor Zeno in the east accepted the barbarian rule, granting him legitimate power. The ancient Roman world was now broken into many independent warring kingdoms. The Franks in Gaul, Visigoths in Hispania, and the Vandals across the shores of northern Africa. The brilliant light of classical learning, engineering, and civic order faded into darkness. The Grand Colosseum, where gladiators once fought for glory, stood haunted by wandering ghosts. Marble temples were dismantled to build simple fortifications and modest peasant homes. But the legacy of the fallen empire was far too immense to be erased from human memory. The Latin language survived in the monasteries, copied faithfully by patient and pious monks. Concepts of Roman law and justice continued to influence the new rulers of the continent. It is vital to understand the fall of Romulus was never a sudden or unexpected event. It was merely the inevitable conclusion of a long process of deep structural decay. Decades of instability and endless civil wars had drained the vitality of the Roman state. Emperors were frequently eliminated by their guards, making the throne a highly deadly trap. Severe crisis and heavy taxation destroyed the middle class, leaving only the very rich and poor. Relying on mercenary armies meant that Rome was defended by those who did not truly love her. The quiet, bloodless coup was a natural consequence of this prolonged and fatal inner weakness. When a tree rots from the inside, it only takes a gentle breeze to bring the massive trunk crashing down. The fall of Rome teaches us that even the most seemingly invincible empires are truly fragile. In the grand scope of history, the year 476 is a haunting and crucial turning point. It marks the definitive end of an era defined by monumental achievements and conquests. But it also signals the painful birth of a completely new civilization from scattered ashes. Out of the ruins of the Western Roman Empire, the foundation of modern Europe was finally laid. The barbarian kings soon converted to the new religion, blending their culture with Roman faith. New laws, new languages, and completely new nations slowly emerged from the chaotic aftermath. Today, the quiet fields of Ravenna still hide the profound secrets of that fateful autumn day. We look back at young Romulus, not with bitter anger, but with an overwhelming sense of pity. He was forced to carry the crushing weight of a dying world that he could never hope to save. His surrender was an act of tragic necessity, preserving his own life when the empire fell. As the final rays of the Roman sun dipped beneath the horizon, the Dark Ages finally began. The story of Rome reminds us glory is fleeting, but the silent echoes of history endure. Was the bloodless surrender a shameful act of cowardice, or a wise choice to save lives? Could the mighty Roman Empire have survived a final battle? Share your theories below. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, share with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more.